all heard Donald Trump's complaints about fake news and the lies that are spread online, but people are now making money off the US president's infamous fake news.
Yeah, for more, editor at yourmoney.com.au and author of USA G'day, Alex Vigovich joins us now in studio. Yeah, we had this big Trump address yesterday, a lot of build-up, the event itself massive, then you've had all the post-analysis. Fact checkers have been very busy with this one, haven't they?
Yeah, absolutely. And we should say at the outset that Your Money is not one of the organisations that are profiting from fake news. Of course, only hard-hitting and well-researched information at Your Money. Look, these national addresses from the Oval Office, they're still kind of a big deal, even though we're in a social media age and Trump, tweets all day long. They started with Herbert Hoover and Eisenhower was into them, and then JFK kind of really made them popular because he was probably a little more telegenic than the others. So they are still a big deal, and Trump did one on Monday around this whole shutdown and border issue, and of course it attracts a lot of attention, including from the fact checkers. So, Washington Post counted 11 different mistruths in the 10-minute segment. Hard to tell whether that is a lot or not a lot by Donald Trump's standards. Certainly more than I'd want to have on the website. But I think broadly this is the latest battle in the Trump versus what he calls the fake news media.
Another one I saw was one every 34 seconds.
Yeah, wow.
In 8 minutes. So, yeah, roughly, it's not sounding good.
And more broadly,
long address.
Yeah, I mean, CNN has said, he's really averaging at one false insult per day, which is about 400 during the, term of his presidency. But you also got to factor in that CNN, Trump would consider being the epicenter of the fake news media. They've got a very tense relationship with him. He's de-credentialed a senior White House correspondent from CNN, and during the campaign, there were allegations of collusion between CNN and the Clinton campaign, so you might want to fact check that as well.
And it's so funny because they do have these big discussions, and especially on CNN, which, as you said, maybe is the epicenter, about why don't we actually just call it out as lies? That's a whole other discussion. We call them falsehoods, false statements, false claims, untruths, fake news. And very little occasions do we call it actually lie.
Yeah, that's right.
It's a really interesting ethical kind of discussion for the media as well.
And maybe it's because lie has a connotation of there being a kind of deliberate deceit.
Yes.
I think that's part of the problem with fake news, is you've got what we hear about being fake news, which is very often, political bias or an agenda or an accident made by a media company that wasn't properly corrected. But then you've got more serious fake news that, is actually aiming to have a detriment and to shift politics, and that's, more of a nefarious type activity.
So just quickly, before we move on from this particular speech, when we talk about 11 or one every 34 seconds, are people pouncing on, relatively minor things, that he got somebody's name wrong or whatever it might be, or is this big picture stuff that he's misidentifying an issue, he's representing something completely as it shouldn't be?
Yeah, look, I think in this case it has to do with primarily him linking the southern border with the flow of narcotics into the United States, which is of course a really deeply felt topic at the moment, with opioid addiction at really staggering and worrying levels. So a lot of it had to do with that. But I think, more broadly, the business side is something that's also really interesting and underlooked because, as you say, there are businesses that are profiting from this now.
Yeah, gamblers were dining out on this. There's some incredible stories about people putting their money on the fact that he's going to make those false statements or lies.
Yeah, well, one bookie had to pay out 270 grand, so they're probably not one of the organisations.
8 minutes is good work for someone, 270 grand.
That's right.
US.
Donald Trump really popularised this term when he attacked the media and made them a political issue during the 2016 campaign. But a lot of people don't know that really this whole fake news thing started as a small business. It was a bunch of, tech-savvy, English as a second language grads in the former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia who got together and put together a digital media operation. One of their first fake news headlines was Pope Francis endorses Donald Trump, which is a great headline and of course turned out to be fake, and they just watched the notifications roll in. And subsequently we've seen this kind of cottage industry emerge where people are playing and becoming serious digital media operatives on the back of this false information.
And how far it's become. One of the really interesting things that we read today was the type of people who seem to be doing the most sharing of what is fake news. So what can you tell us about that?
So there was this study put out by New York University that says, there was a higher percentage of people sharing fake news that were in the 65 and over bracket. They didn't give a whole lot of reasoning around why this was. They said that will be in subsequent studies. But it is really interesting, and partly it may be reflective of the fact that in the United States, of course, voting is voluntary. and older Americans tend to vote in much larger numbers than younger Americans. As well as that, you know, there is a slightly higher percentage of older Americans who skew Republican or conservative, and a lot of the fake news during the election was allegedly sort of skewed in that direction. And maybe it's a sign of Facebook's shifting demographics as well to an older demographic.
Yeah,
that,
all the young kids are off Facebook, right?
That's right. No,
But do you think we'd have similar, I mean, that was a US study, do you think we'd see something similar here? Maybe not so, based on what you're saying.
Look, I think possibly it would be more difficult in a compulsory voting environment to have it swing as much. But, you know, at the same time, we are getting the same sort of fake news, you know, sort of calls and discussions and hashtags going on in Australian politics as well, of course.
The scary part, I guess, is when it slips through and then a major news publication starts reporting on what is actually fake news because they picked it up in the wrong spot. Does that happen very much?
Yeah, that's right. Well, there was even a research report by a serious academic institute, the University of Indiana, I think, on fake news, and they were looking very seriously at the reasons for it and the implications of it, and it was picked up by BuzzFeed and Business Insider and a bunch of others, and even that was false in the end. So we're in a bit of a fake news vortex. I think on the plus side, though, you know, it's easy for people to become desensitised to this and to laugh at it. And certainly when you've got people betting on the number of falsehoods in a national presidential address, it can seem humorous. But you know, there is a worrying element, and it's increasingly important for consumers to just be critical when they're seeing information online and ensuring they're going to reputable outlets.
I did love when Channel 7 put on the bio of Bancroft the other day on the cricket, the fake news from the Batuta Advocate. Did you see that?
I didn't see that.
Batuta Advocate had kind of made up some fake news a couple of years ago, and Channel 7 pulled it up.
They got
off the
caught
net.
up with it.
Yeah, on screen, putting up this crazy thing about Bancroft being a kazoo player from the band Tame Impala. So, I mean, it does get pretty funny, but...
In defence of my online media peers and colleagues out there, you know, it is a very rapid-paced environment. It is difficult. The important thing is to correct it in real time and to make sure you're being honest.
Yep. In the meantime, left red-faced. Thank you so much. Alex, you're an expert on this stuff. USA G'day is the book that we love here in the newsroom. Thank you, Alex. From